I did learn about you from your appearance on New Thinking Aloud. Jeffrey Mitchlove. I have a hard time pronouncing his last name, but I interviewed him
Yeah.
as well. He
Yes.
recently won the $500,000 prize from Robert Bigelow regarding what happens after you pass away and consciousness. Is that something that you would have applied for because you would have qualified through your research? And what is your opinion on what happens when you pass from what you've studied?
Um, he did. I didn't. He did. I knew he was entering. He did ask me for a few comments on it, which I did, and he mentioned me in the thing, and he even quoted from me in relation to survival after death. Uh, I do believe it. I do believe. Um, I do believe that there are signs. I'll give you an example. Little thing. I don't know if this is relevant, but um, the day I was in Spain when my mother died, and that day I had that the bird coming into the house, which is a classic sign associated with someone dying, a messenger. And my grandmother, her mother died later than my mother actually, and the same thing happened. The bird came into the house now on the same day. So um, the fact of these synchronicities, if you want to call them signs, they were things that people used to accept, and it was only in the last generation with Dawkins and constant stuff in the media about science and tax on religion, tax on spirituality, that people began to believe that these things were not real, and they began to find them inappropriate, and they began to change their minds, be more modern, more scientific, show how progressive they were. So those things were very very common, and the survival after death. I believe that I believe that if you take our consciousness and ask what it is, you come to a scientific view that it's something that emerged, that's something that evolved. I was reading recent theories about it, the idea that it's merely to maintain homeostasis. It doesn't make any sense to me. That's the hard problem of consciousness, is a problem that they've found because they've never been able to replace the idea of spiritual consciousness. This has been a mistake, in my view, to take it out of the equation. But if you want to rule the world, you can't allow this spiritual consciousness to persist. And that's why they have been attacking it and trying. But you cannot reduce the individual to anything. And if you accept the idea that our being, or the brain being more a receptive force, for example, if you look at out of body experiences, if you look at near death experiences. And my mother, for example, years ago, I remember, before I ever heard about near death experiences, she told me about a near death experiences. And people that have near death experience don't often, and didn't then necessarily tell people, because it's a difficult thing. There's good points, but it can be difficult to get people to understand what you're talking about. And she told me about that, and as a result of that, she never had any fear of death. She was absolutely convinced about the different dimensions. Now, for me, when the body goes in those experiences, or those moves into those contexts, or when the body dies, and this entity emerges from the body, that's who we are. I believe that is the being in us, the spiritual being, if you like, and that survives. And the problem is not about what happens after we die. The problem is about what happens when we live. If we don't accept that we have this spiritual being, it becomes difficult for us to interpret what's going on in the world, and we can get very, very confused. We can get hypnotized by these various forces. So yes, I believe that our consciousness will survive, and I believe, consistent with the idea of spiritual evolution, that's what the meaning of our life is. The meaning of our life is to explore these things. Now, if we think about, say, Hannibal or Devon, or behind all that, when you go behind all that, there's still a consciousness. There is still a seer that exists before all the persona, the mask, if you like, of the personality. And the seer is the thing we forget. Is the thing that scientists can't deal with, even when they're talking in their objectivity, when they're standing back looking. They forget that they're still an observer looking. There's always that consciousness behind. So I do believe that consciousness survives. I also believe, which is not which is not very fashionable, that that's the reason that there is a kind of karmic sense about what we're doing here. That we have to evolve, and that's the purpose. So that that there is a meaning and an intent, and that's what all spiritual leaders say. Whether you're looking at the Buddha or the great other great Indian thinkers, or Jesus Christ, or all the great spiritual beings say that we have to. It's about evolution. That the evolution of the spirit, and scientists have turned that into. First, with the theory of evolution, they said, "Well, we understand who you are now. You're an animal that has evolved. It's just a different type of being, an animal." And as soon as they got that established, then they said, "Okay, now we're going to artificially change evolution." And that's the idea behind a lot of eugenics, which is coming back again, and the idea that they can change your DNA, they can hack you, and they will hack you, and they will be able to control you and control your genetic structure, or the genetic structure of your family or your descendants. And that's part of this idea, a control mechanism, which merely sees the individual as a physical force, as a pattern of information. And that's a very dangerous one, because it means they have no commitment to human dignity. So I think a lot of the ideas of consciousness, a lot of the ideas of human dignity come from spiritual experiences. If you look back, they don't just plucked out of the air. They're not automatic. They grew over a period of time when people said, actually, we're more than this thing. And that's what the effort has been, the highest effort in humanity. So I believe that spiritual consciousness persists, and that the problem is when you begin to take away the idea of spiritual consciousness, then people don't believe that there is anything to persist afterwards. So we need both.
Thank you for watching the Hannibal TV. Please help me out and like this video, then click the subscribe and get notifications buttons so you don't miss any of my latest shoot interviews, match videos, or news updates. Follow us on Facebook at the Hannibal TV for more live streams and videos. And while you're at it, follow us on Instagram and Twitter at the Hannibal TV.